Is on home and belonging, and specifically what a home ecosystem might feel like or look like to you. And this is inspired by the upcoming Spinners of Fate circle that's happening on May 15th. And here on Salt Spring, there's a few spots left. So I've been feeling into what does a home ecosystem mean? Because in my experience, just to give some context, home for me has looked like a huge hollowed out cedar tree with a tarp over it. Home for me has looked like the back of a station wagon with my husband and my daughter and a buffalo. Home has looked like living in tents. Home has looked like living in a carved out a hole under somebody's stairs. Home has looked like this, 2-bedroom house with a studio on 20 acres. Home has looked a lot of different ways for me. And in the changing of home and all the different ways that I have found myself experiencing a new version of home, it's shown light on what is it that word even means. Like, what does home mean for me? Because it's not as straightforward as I have a kitchen and a sink and maybe a toilet, and there are certain structures that I think that will allow you to have your needs met. But for me, the home ecosystem is more than just the physical parameters. It's the spirits of the land that you live on, the root systems, the plants. It's the people that are surrounding you, whether or not you relate to them or even communicate with them. You might be in a condo with like hundreds and hundreds of people, and all of those people are part of your home ecosystem, whether you want to or not. They're energetically, you're dream sharing with them. The beliefs of the people that you coexist with, if you're living in a community like setting, or even just a societal setting, all of the beliefs are going to affect the home ecosystem that you live in. Because those beliefs and those laws and, social agreements will affect who you can be in your home. It might, as straightforward, like it might affect that naked gardener in you not feeling like they can fully shine in their nude glory. So when we're talking about the ecosystem of what it means to be home, it's really important to start considering all of these variables. And the other day, or today actually, I was watching these little chicks hatch from my daughter's school. They have a little incubator, and there was something really physical for me, and I was having this like somatic response around watching this egg have a piece of its like shell removed and seeing the tiny little chick underneath starting to push at it. And I could just relate to that sensation of when we have outgrown a home. And so, the first one for all of us being the womb. At some point, if you're watching this, you outgrew the womb and needed to be dropped into whatever home ecosystem was waiting for you, whatever that looked like. And acknowledging that those ecosystems of the people around you, the physical structures, the amenities, the sound, the colors, the season around you, all of that was your first imprint of home in this life. So I invite you to explore what that first ecosystem was, and that also includes explore like what was your birth story like, because how you arrive and into earth, how you arrive into whoever is greeting you, is kind of holding a blueprint on how you will probably relate to transitioning when you need to transition and when you've grown out, for whatever reason, the home that you've been in. I also want to name that like there's different ways and timings of transition, and they all kind of will affect us differently. So one transition would be there's a transition when you're like, I've got to leave by X, Y, and Z. I've got this life point. My nervous system and my body are able to start to prepare ourselves to adjust to that transition of home. There's, anomalies like forest fires, like unexpected experiences where your physical home is removed, or deportation. There's so many ways that we need to transition home. And some of those are a lot more obvious, But what I want to get to also in this call is, what if you have just like actually grown to the seams of what's possible in the ecosystem of the home you find yourself in? And so that one can be trickier, because sometimes it comes down to, who can I be and grow into in this home, in this home's ecosystem? And just like a pot, like a plant, where there's a certain point, if any of you tend plants, where the plant starts filling out the root system of the pot it's in, and there's this like sweet point where you either help that plant either go into the earth where it's going to complete its life cycle, or you plant it into something bigger. So we are like that too, my dears. There is a time in all of our growth, I believe, where we have to get really honest with, does the parameters of this home's ecosystem, is it now restricting me? Because what can happen is, if you push beyond that point, just like a plant, the root system, the ability to have space to grow and stretch and receive more nutrients, starts to kind of be cramped. And so that can lead to like stunting. That can lead to, in my experience, it can be really confusing, because sometimes those sensations of like being stunted or being compressed, or can feel like it's just who we are. No, this is just who I am. I live this way. Instead of realizing sometimes that transplant and that actual home relocation needs to happen for you to experience and explore the more full spectrum version of yourself. And so in the podcast episode I just recorded, I kind of was getting into this idea of, well, one, it's not always that easy. Like, if some of you are like, Sarah, like, you want me, you're inviting, yeah, I feel so trapped and stagnant, and hey, I don't have the financial resources to move. Hey, I'm in maybe a co-parenting situation where it's really complicated. Hey, I'm in a messy immigration situation. There's a lot of reasons why we can't just leap, right? At the same time, I will say from personal experience, I have leaped like one brave mofo so many times, like across countries, across oceans, once I've felt that like really, really completed cycle of a home's ecosystem that I'm part of. And I want to say that these leaps are not always so gentle or graceful or even logical, because sometimes the leaps that need to happen in our home, if it's in a relocation, oh no, somebody's saying they're having a hard time hearing my voice. Let's see. Sorry, guys. I'm like recording this in two spots. Not sure. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can. Is anyone else having a hard time hearing me? I can hear, but very quiet. Oh no. Okay. All right, I'm coming in, y'all. So, where was I? Home relocation. Sometimes it's a leap of faith. I will say that anytime that I've had to make an extreme leap of faith, the one deciding factor has been this like deep, guttural, primal yes. And I usually feel it like down below in my womb, in my sacrum, because the mind, there's certain leaps that the mind can just not, like, cannot get on board with. And so I'll say, like, when it's time to leap, like I said earlier, sometimes it's really not that straightforward. If you're a caregiver, if you're a co-parent, there's going to be variables. If you're in an abusive relationship, if you're financially strapped, I'm really aware that I want to name that those can be variables that make it really, really feel really dense. And because I've been in almost all of those experiences, I can say that there's the belief that has kind of pulled me beyond that is remembering that this world, this life, this universe loves to like form itself and shift itself to accommodate our own growth. And once I've kind of leaned into that trust that I am going to be held and caught in some way, it might be a rocky landing, but if my body is telling me that the next step, if I need to move out of my home, if I need to move out of my community, I have moved out of countries, y'all. Then usually the body is connecting in with information that the mind hasn't got on board with yet. And so one thing that has helped me a lot is getting out of, if you're finding yourself in a similar situation, is asking first, like sometimes the question is like, where on the world do I need to go? Like sometimes it gets that big. But if it gets to a point where you're like, I need to move this home, where on, I live on a small island, where in this island do I need to move? I'll actually start to speak to the spirit of the island herself. Because think of it this way, the island or the land, the whole planet, if you can get on board with this belief that this planet is a sentient being with a deep well of information and tracking of herself or itself, then you could ask this being. What I would do is I would show them. I'd be like, here's me, here's my family, here's the frequency that I am carrying in this life, like almost like a platter. Like I like put myself, my family, like if you're in a situation where you have people you're caregiving, like this is us. Where do you feel, knowing exactly all of the structures, the like human structures that are on this island, I'll use for example, every single home on this island, all of the trees and the waterways, all of the people that are cohabitating in these areas. Like you, dear island, know exactly the ecosystem of home that is existing already here. Where is my specific frequency going to match and be in a reciprocal relationship that is mutually beneficial to the land, to myself, to my own growth, to the family's growth? And so when I've kind of played with it in that way, it takes it can start by taking out the humanness and let the land start to speak for itself. And so that's my one tangent there. I'm sorry for those of you that can't hear very well on Facebook. And why this is tying into belonging. So when we get into Spinners of Fate on Friday for belonging, which is segueing. So we're segueing from like in the Spinners format, we're going from money to being well-resourced, and well-resourced flows into home, and home flows into belonging, which flows into connection, which flows or into relationships and into connection. And so what I have learned in all the different places that I have lived in this world is that for me, the social ecosystem is key. It is so key. Where are my people? And so this can become really clear when you are realizing that the social ecosystem, the people that, whether it's just your neighbors or the people that you share a house with or a community with, if that social ecosystem is starting to have pretty key differences in very important belief structures on, fundamental belief structures that are interfering with your ability to actually feel a deep sense of belonging, then most likely, unless you can do the heavy lifting of like the social intervention and being, naming it, like this last year, I've done a lot of just putting my head out there and naming incongruencies, naming challenges I'm seeing, like just naming the pieces of my social landscape that are not meeting my own need for expansion. And the beauty of that is sometimes just naming it is informing the reality you're in. It's informing the social ecosystem and even life itself. And it's giving an opportunity for information to come back that might change how you feel. Sometimes it's like we might have these beliefs that feel really sedentary and locked in, but it is with that new information that comes from the people that are associated with these beliefs that they get to change. But it's only for me, it's been like that awkward experience that to create that sense of belonging, I have to name what is not feeling good. And that by naming what is not feeling congruent with the growth that is happening inevitably. We're all growing inevitably, right? Like we're all growing and changing and shedding and like losing our hair and growing our skin cells. And so that comes to a point. I know, I'm sorry that people keep saying that they can't hear me on Facebook, but y'all, I don't use it's a device I don't use because my mic. Oh, somebody